Hello and welcome to the newest Lakers Theory podcast. I am Shane Jackson. Joining with me as always is Austin Case. We're coming to you on a Friday night, the first podcast of 2021. And it comes right after the Lakers defeated the Spurs 109-103 about 20 minutes ago. And it completed a two-game sweep in San Antonio for the Lakers. The first game was 121-107 on Wednesday. We haven't recorded since Monday, which was the frustrating Blazers loss in which I was drinking wine in frustration. I have wine again, but it's in celebration. Austin, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. It was good to see him get a win. I didn't get to watch the first game against the Spurs because I couldn't get any streams to work, and it was honestly it was so frustrating because I would get to watch like 2 minutes and then I would just get a loading screen and I would go to a different stream, get a good 2 minutes in and loading. So it was nice to have a televised game again so I could watch it.
Well, you didn't miss much as someone who did find a stream that works. Wesley Matthews hit 6 3-pointers, and really that's the only thing that stood out from that game. So most of this podcast, we will spend the airtime talking about the second Spurs game because it was interesting. It was close down the stretch, and I think there's more takeaways from that because of that. And also because you didn't watch the first game, we won't get into that too much. But we are both League Pass customers moving forward, so we'll get to watch all the Lakers games moving forward, and we won't have to worry about these streams, unreliable streams. What was reliable was the Lakers closing lineup. I think I wanted to start there because really that was what we hit on the most in the last podcast against the Blazers. And part of the frustration was it felt like Frank Vogel was just tweaking too much in that closing lineup since it didn't seem like he played his best five. And I thought he did tonight, and that was really the difference. The final 4.5 minutes, Anthony Davis played the center position. Wesley Matthews, Dennis Schroeder, Kyle Kuzma, and LeBron James were in there as well. That was the closing lineup for the Lakers. What did you think about that group, Austin?
I liked it, and from what we saw, that's a good group to close a game out. KCP went down, so he's probably in there instead of Matthews. But they got the job done. They finished the game on a 9-0 scoring run, while also holding the Spurs scoreless for the last 2.5 minutes. So that's a good squad to be out there if you're late game. It's a tight game and you want to get the job done.
Yeah, it was tied 103-103 right after that Anthony Davis step back three. And then you had two back-to-back defense possessions, one where Dennis Schroeder had really good on-ball defense, kind of in no man's land there on the left side of the court on the baseline. But he forced a bad shot just by his presence alone. And then the next possession was Wesley Matthews on that Murray drive, and he was all over him the entire time. The announcers were Spurs announcers, which you did not know until there was 5 minutes left.
I did not.
Which is incredible to me. You were like, man, these guys are Spurs homers. And I was like, that's because of the San Antonio broadcast.
I was getting so, I'm yelling at the TV because these guys are pissing me off so bad. But once you told me that, I was like, okay, that makes sense. But I was still yelling at them because it was so annoying.
I thought they made so many comments that were obvious that they were the Spurs broadcaster, like our, and all this stuff.
It makes sense now. But to me, I was like, these guys will not give Lakers any respect. AD hit that three, and it sounded like they were so disappointed. And the Spurs went down there and Schroeder had the good defensive play, and they didn't acknowledge that at all. It was just a bad shot, and I was like, "You have to be kidding me!" I was getting heated, even though we were winning the game.
I brought that up because they on the broadcast said that they could live with that shot, which I agree. You live with that shot if you're the Spurs. But it was worth noting that I thought Wesley Matthews played really good defense on that possession.
Yes.
About as good as you can ask for when you're talking about a player like him. And again, as you mentioned, he probably wouldn't be on the court in that closing lineup if KCP was healthy. But I thought that was a good five, mostly because I thought, and you tweeted this, you handled the Twitter updates on the Lakers Theory Twitter channel, which is at Lakers Theory. If you're not following us, that's where you get our analysis as the games are going on, when we can watch the games, obviously. But you tweeted that, Trez looked out of rhythm for much of that game, and I think that played a part in him not being in that final stretch. But really, the point was AD at the 5 was what we wanted in that Blazers game. I think you got 1 minute or something like that of AD at the 5 in the next Spurs game, or the first Spurs game. But this was really, hey, Frank Vogel saying, we need this. This is the best lineup that we can close out with. And so I really appreciated him going with this group down the stretch.
Yeah, if AD has to play the 5 for 4.5 minutes every few games, that's probably not a big deal to AD. At least I hope not. If the game's on the line, then he should want to play the 5. If that means we get the best lineup on the floor.
I should note that Anthony Davis finished with 34 points. He was really the difference. Like, this was his best game of the year. And I thought, Frank Vogel said before the game that the Lakers are going to get their best shot against every team, right? And there's almost a blessing in disguise with that. Whereas you might lose more games than you're supposed to, but it's going to challenge you and prepare you for the postseason, right? I thought this was an indication of what he was trying to say along those lines. They got the Spurs' best shot. Keldon Johnson could not miss in the second half. And I think this was a case of that, where you saw, hey, at the end of the day, the Lakers were just more talented. Like, LeBron James finished with his first triple-double of the year, his first of year 18. Anthony Davis dropped over 30 points. Like, it was an actual game for much of the night, and the Lakers didn't play well. But in the end, they have more talent than the other team, than most other teams, and that's what we saw.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. There was a lot of contact on a lot of plays there down the stretch, and it seemed like they were just letting the game play out. And I personally would rather see that, even though I would get really frustrated because it seems like Lakers aren't going to get those calls anyway. But like, it was really good to see that, like, they were just playing basketball and the better team finished that game on top.
Yeah, it makes you think the refs had things to do, like, because they were not calling anything the final 4 minutes of the game. It was incredible. I think that covers most of what we thought of the way the Lakers closed it out. Let's get into, I think, specifics of Dennis Schroeder and Wesley Matthews, which, again, Wesley Matthews really had his breakout game, or his first big game as a Laker in that first Spurs game. So this is a good opportunity to talk about him from that perspective. But Austin, what'd you see from either player, either tonight or the first Spurs game?
On the offensive end, Schroeder, we're probably going to see this every night offensively from him. Defensively, I thought it was just incredible, especially in those closing minutes. We really saw great defense from him, but I also thought he played very good defensively throughout the whole game. But and Matthews too, like, he, in those closing minutes, it was just like, something changed, and they were like, we're not going to give them anything. Like, they're going to have to get through us and earn these buckets. And, well, they didn't score anything for the last 2.5 minutes. So something was there tonight where they weren't going to give this game away like they did against Portland.
Yeah, 5 Lakers players finished in double figures. I should say that because we are showing this box score for those watching this podcast in video form. But if you're listening on audio, you don't get to see that. We are actually on all audio platforms, by the way. Austin finally did his job after I complained about him in the last podcast. But we are on Apple iTunes, which means we are on every format you could possibly imagine to listen to an audio podcast at Lakers Theory. But yeah, again, 5 players finishing in double figures. Anthony Davis, 34, LeBron, 26, Schroeder, 15, KCP with 11, and Kuzma with 11. I say all this to say I agree with you. Schroeder was active really on both ends of the floor. I think the defensive end is really noteworthy to me because I thought there were admittedly concerns about how his fit would be defensively. But what I saw was a guy who plays with a lot of energy, similar to things we've said about Trez already earlier in the year. But it's just you can tell that his speed is a problem. And I personally like that last play that I've already alluded to, but that play where he had great on-ball defense was really one of my favorite plays of the game.
Mm-hmm.
That said, there was a play there in the third quarter, I think about 4.5 minutes left in the third quarter, when Kuzma was called for a charge on that kick-out pass to Schroeder.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see Kuzma telling Schroeder he should have gone to the corner. And I think that speaks to that this team is still growing and figuring each other out. And I think that play kind of highlighted just how much of a work in progress all of this still is. Like Schroeder impressed me, for 4 quarters, but there are still moments where you go, okay, he should have been there on the floor instead of there. And I think that comes obviously with more games playing with everybody else, but it just shows. And the Spurs broadcasters that you hated so much allude to this already. Like, it just shows that the Lakers are a better team than they were last year, but they're still actually growing as a team.
Yeah, like the Kuz and Schroeder ordeal. Like, Kuz is coming off the bench, so they're going to have to build that chemistry through game action, and probably especially now where they might not be practicing as much, and so that's just going to have to come around on its own, and it will. So like I'm excited. Like they're such a good team. Like it's crazy, and they're gonna have bad nights, but at the end of the day, like they're such a good team, and I love watching them.
They're such a good team, and they have 2 of the top players in the NBA. One of which really showed up for the first time all year. That is Anthony Davis. We'll go to there because I feel like we've talked about all these bullcrap things about the game, but really the story of the game is Anthony Davis. Like him having his best game of the year when the team really needed it. He scored 34 points. He shot 13 of 26 from the floor, 4 of 6 from long range. Again, I already mentioned that step back 3. He also had 11 rebounds and 5 assists. Did not have a block. He actually got called for a block on the defensive end, and I almost made a joke that was like one of his first blocks of the year. Although I think he had a block in that first Spurs game. But yes, he obviously has not been the rim protector that we thought when we were discussing him as a potential defense player of the year candidate. Then again, the Spurs didn't take a lot of shots at the rim. I think they had 8 shots at the rim, which is insanely low. The numbers that you can't even really make up in that sense. So, Austin, what did you see about Anthony Davis's game tonight?
The biggest thing really is how aggressive he was. And it just shows when AD is aggressive on the floor, like he's going to be a leader on the offensive end and the defensive end, actually. But so like if AD is aggressive from the get-go, like it's going to be very hard to beat the Lakers in any game, honestly, no matter who they're playing. So it was good to see him kind of just get out there and just play good basketball.
Yeah, there are things that you can just tell when Anthony Davis is being a little bit more assertive, because we pretty much called out his aggressiveness in that last Blazer podcast. But there are like subtle things that you can notice that, hey, Anthony Davis is trying to be a bigger impact in this game than normal. One of which is the amount of attempts he gets to the free throw line. Like he had 7 attempts tonight. I think he's had some games already this year where he hasn't had hardly any, like 1 or 2. I don't have his game log in front of me, but I can't remember. But and then other instances are how close he is to the rim. Like you saw late in the game, he was posting guys up. And he really sets up a lot closer to the rim when he's being more aggressive. Other times he is, he's starting in 15 feet away, and he can shoot obviously, and he's gifted. He's got a guard's game and a post body, but I think those are like low key things that I noticed when I'm like, hey, Anthony Davis is being a little more assertive tonight, because it's when he's getting to the free throw line and it's when he is putting an emphasis on getting shots to the rim, which I don't think the Lakers did enough of.
Yeah. Like I almost put a tweet out, but I wasn't quite sure how to word it. I'm not a wizard with words like you are, but it was, it was just a few kind of back-to-back possessions. And I was just like, is there anything AD can't do on a basketball court? Because like I feel like he could take just about any position to the hoop offensively. Like he's got great handles. He can hit a step back three just as well, almost just as well as anyone, and like he can post guys down and get around them, and it's just amazing to me what he can do, and like it just seems like there's not anything that he wouldn't be able to do on the court.
Yeah, he certainly is a special player, and one that's going to be even more of a special player for years to come. A player on the team who is really special, has been special for many, many years now, is LeBron James. First triple-double, as I alluded to earlier, of year 18. He scored 26 points. He collected 11 rebounds and dished out 10 assists. And you could tell late in the game that he wanted to be a focal point of that offense. He wanted to get to the rim. He was complaining with the ref at one point for not giving him a foul. Like he was trying to initiate contact down the stretch, and he was aggressive. And there was a lot to like about LeBron's game tonight. You could say that about in almost any night, but he's so consistent on a game-to-game basis. But certain nights you can just tell it means a little bit more. And it wasn't really. I guess his birthday, it didn't mean a whole lot more. I don't remember what he did on the birthday game, but tonight he was good. What did you like about LeBron's game tonight?
Honestly, I like LeBron's game at any night that he plays, but it definitely seemed like this was a game where he's like, we're going to go win this game. Like we're going to do what we need to do to get this dub. And that's what you saw. Like, honestly, he didn't have the greatest shooting night.
No,
He hit all his free throws though, so that's something to acknowledge. But like kind of in that closing stretch, he did hit like he hit a big three in my point in closing that game out. So it's kind of in games like this, you see him just switch to that like. Just we're gonna go get this win mode, and so that I love seeing that, and like I just love watching him play basketball, especially in these late games like this when he's just like, we're gonna go win.
Yeah, he's such a catalyst to the offense. Like that Taylor Horton-Tucker 3-pointer there in I think the third or fourth quarter, I can't remember which one it was. Now at this point, where he kicked it out, like you could tell he was the one initiating all of it, and then he found the open man. His pass to Anthony Davis, where he lobbed it in like the 5:44 mark in the first quarter, all he did was just throw it up there, and literally Anthony Davis was the only person that could get it, and it was just an incredible pass. And honestly, it happened so early in the game that I was like, nobody's going to ever mention that ever again. Like it was one of those plays that was such a great pass, and everybody's probably forgotten about it by now. But that was one of my favorite plays of the night. And obviously, as someone who's wearing a LeBron James jersey, will always wear a LeBron James jersey. I was a big fan of the way he played tonight.
I actually have my LeBron James shirt on tonight. So, but like just real quick, like I'm glad you brought up that just the alley-oop, because I did forget about it, and like it was so awesome because. I mean, LeBron just threw it up, and AD just pretty much jumped over this dude, grabbed it, and threw it in the hoop. And there was nothing the defender could do about it.
Yeah, spoiler alert, when it comes to basketball, like my guilty pleasure is a good pass. And that will always be what I will talk about on this podcast. Like, oh, did you see this pass? And oftentimes people have already forgotten about it. But that's my favorite part of the game, and it's obvious why I like LeBron when you factor in that. But we just have to talk about LeBron and AD. I didn't want to spend the whole podcast talking about them, and hopefully we didn't. Let's mention KCP. He hurt his ankle. I wrote this down at some point. When was it? This is bad radio, but 8:40 mark in the third quarter. He hurt his left ankle driving to the rim. Didn't come back in the game. It was called a mild ankle sprain as far as I knew, and the X-rays came back negative. You're obviously a big KCP fan. He's been as reliable as it gets for the Lakers. He played 82 games 2 years ago, was it? And then he played all but one game last year, I believe, and it was big in the postseason as well, and during that bubble stretch. What was your thought when KCP went down, and just how concerned were you?
Um, Initially, I wasn't sure. Like I saw him go down and kind of stay down, so I was like, oh great, like KCP has been balling this year. I feel like, and like I'm super rooting for him, and then he gets hurt. Um, but it is good to see that the X-rays are negative, and it's just really a mild sprain. And from what I saw on Twitter, there's a chance that he'll play on Sunday, but we'll see. And kind of with that, like just before we started recording, I saw that Caruso is going to miss the first game in Memphis, so it'll be interesting to see if KCP does play, because if not, they're going to be pretty shorthanded at the guard position. But kind of up until that point, I thought KCP was having a very good game, and he's been reliable. That's like the best way to put it for him. He's been very reliable.
Yeah, and he was having a good third quarter there. He had a really good poster dunk, I think, at some point in the third quarter there. And yeah, like you said, he was having a good game. And considering how available he's been the last couple of years for the Lakers, this obviously would be a big blow for them. We always make comments about their depth and just how talented this roster is, but I mean, he's a starter on this team. He plays a lot of minutes, even though obviously he only got 17 tonight, but it would be a blow to not have KCP in that scenario. Austin, I did want to talk about this from a perspective that if he's not available, because I think there's a very reasonable chance he won't play. If he's not available, who do the Lakers go with in their starting five?
I really think they've put Matthews in there because they're similar player types. So to me, it would make sense that Matthews just jumps into that spot, and then probably they rotate a little sooner than they would. So I would say that Matthews is probably the guy who gets the call. If for some reason Kuz started, though, that would be pretty awesome just for my Kuz fandom. But
yeah.
Ideally, I really think Matthews probably gets the call there.
Yeah, my first gut was Kuzma because, well, he was the one who came in for KCP when KCP went down. And, you brought up good points, though. Like, Wesley Matthews makes sense in that fit when you're talking about him starting. So I guess that wouldn't surprise me. And he was, a player who closed out the lineup there with him, although Kuzma did as well. But, yeah, I guess that makes sense. I still think, giving any chance you can give Kuzma, I guess, an increased opportunity when the opportunity presents itself, I'm always a fan of. Like when AD missed that game, Kuzma started, right? So, Kuzma's accepted this role, which honestly is insane, given how successful he's been early at this point in his career, right? Players of his age who've had as much success as he's had don't do what he's done. But he's accepted his role, kind of, minimized what he could be. And so I think, it's not the way teams obviously think about when they're making decisions like this. But if you can give Kuzma a chance for an increased opportunity when there's a chance, I don't know. I think that's kind of the best of both worlds, where you're pleasing Kuzma but also doing the best for the team. And so because of that, I would want Kuzma to start.
I would love to see that. With Kuz's just improvement on defense, I really think if he played the 2 spot, I would feel confident that he could defend the 2 well enough to start. So it'll be interesting to see what they do if KCP does have to sit for a game, maybe 2. But I could see them, saying, "Hey, Kuz, we're gonna start you tonight. Let's see what you can do from that 2 spot." So it'll be interesting to kind of see what they do on Sunday.
Kuzma had a really nice chase down block in this game that we messaged about, but that was pretty cool to see. I wanted to make sure we mentioned that in case for some reason people listening to the show missed it, but that was cool to see. Also, he is blocking a decent number of shots. Like he is.
Yeah,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
yeah, he's just. It seems like his effort on defense has greatly increased, and that probably comes just from the type of team. Like they're more defensive focused, so it was probably they were saying like, hey, if you want more minutes, we're going to have to see more out of you on the defensive end, and like honestly, he's giving that.
And you mentioned just a little bit ago, I wanted to get into it. Alex Caruso missing the first of the Memphis game. It sucks. I miss Alex Caruso a lot. Like, I think my Alex Caruso really fandom really started just to roast you. But honestly, like, I think his presence is felt when he's not there. He adds a perimeter defender that the Lakers just simply don't have in certain matchups. And so I've missed him a lot. I don't know about you, but I think it's been noticeable.
It is noticeable. Like he's just an effort guy. Like he's giving you everything every night that he's on the court, and like you do miss that from a defensive standpoint. Like when he's in the game, he's just getting after like whoever he's on. He's getting after them. So when you don't have that, it's very noticeable.
For sure. And I think I wanted to spend this time talking about it because we're kind of mentioning both San Antonio games right now. And Memphis is going to have a 2-game stretch coming up as well. Do you like this? This was the last thing we discussed before we jumped on the podcast, so I already know your opinion of it, but I will pretend because this is a podcast and we're professionals and all that stuff. I will pretend like I don't know your answer when I ask you, do you like the way this current format is with the 2 games back-to-back in the same city?
I do like it. I honestly think it's so much easier on the players not having to play a game in San Antonio, jump on a bus or plane and fly to Memphis, and then after the game jump on a bus or plane and go to like Chicago or something like that. Like these, it gives them 3 or 4 days in one city, and they're playing 2 games. Like I really hope they stick with this, because I think we could potentially see less injuries, just like wear and tear injuries where guys are getting banged up late in the season. So I like it. I assume the players like it because it gives them more rest just over the course of a season.
Yeah, you're not on a plane as much. You get to potentially enjoy the city a little bit more because you are in there for a few more days. When we were talking about this right before we got on air, Kuzma basically said in his post-game interview that he really liked the way this format works. I'm sure he's not alone. And I know they're not doing anything now, but in their minds, they're thinking, hey, this is a chance 3 or 4 days in a row that we could, party in this city. Like it's a reasonable thought when you're in your mid-20s. So, I think it is an interesting format that I think would be worth exploring. Maybe not the whole way. You don't have to have, every single stretch or series be 2 games back to back, but enough that it could balance it out, I think, and decrease the amount of times that you have to play a game then fly immediately to another city and play one night later, because that sucks. But yeah, I think this was a good recap of the 2-game stretch in San Antonio for the Lakers, where they got 2 wins and moved to 4-2 on the year. I will ask, because I always do, is there anything I forgot and that you want to mention, Austin, before we head out?
Just quickly, I do want to mention that Becky Hammon was the first woman to coach an NBA game. I think that's amazing, and I really hope it gives more opportunity to women in NBA and any just kind of male-dominant sport, just anywhere. And so I just wanted to bring that up real quick.
I'm glad you mentioned that. See, now I will feel justified every time I ask you anything else. Even if you don't ever add anything else, you had one response, and it was the best response ever. So that was good. You're obviously right. That was great to see. And I'm glad you mentioned it right before we got off air because that was incredible. Yes, so this will do it for this podcast, though. We will be back, I think, probably Sunday night after that first Memphis game. I just think it's important to have one, probably that Sunday to Monday when possible. So because the Lakers do play on Sunday, we'll recap that game, assuming it's not a terrible game and we want to hop on air. But it'll probably be a lot shorter since it is just one game recap. But we will try to update this as much as possible about when we are going to record. To follow that, you have to follow us on social media. We're at Lakers Theory on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And then subscribe to us in all the audio platforms and YouTube as well, so you can get our podcast feed, because we're on every single platform that you could find a podcast on, because Austin Case is awesome. He's Austin Case. I'm Shane Jackson. Thank you for listening to a Lakers Theory podcast. The Lakers are 4-2 overall, following 2 wins over the San Antonio Spurs in San Antonio. Thank you for listening, and see you next time, which will be Sunday, January 3rd.